Right. So today we're starting this new unit on population dynamics. And what I wanted to share with you guys, and once I actually looked over these notes were quite outdated, so I decided to update it because as of a few days ago, according to United Nations studies on November 15th, we reached 8 billion. The population of Earth reached 8 billion. And although we understand that really November 15th is more of a symbolic day, it's just an approximation, whether or not we've actually hit 8 billion on November 15th or just slightly before it, slightly after it, it doesn't matter. But it's more of an understanding that it's around this time that population of humanity on Earth has hit the 8 billion mark. And also in the UN's latest population model study, they also revised their long-term projection of thinking that by the year 2100, we're going to be hitting 11 billion. They revised that to a slightly lower number, a 10.4 billion number. And we can discuss some of the factors that might be contributing to this decline. Two factors that might come into play would be obviously fertility rates have declined over the past decades. And also the COVID-19 pandemic has also somewhat affected our global life expectancy. For example, the global life expectancy fell to 71 years during 2021 compared to 72.9 years in 2019 in some countries. And in some countries, there has even been a short-term reduction in the number of pregnancies and births that come to full term as a result of complications due to COVID-19. And the other factor also would be the fertility rates. And it's been a noted factor that fertility rates have recently been declining in the recent decades. One of the statistics I saw was that about 2/3 of the global population live in areas or countries where the lifetime fertility has reached below 2.1 births per woman. And this is roughly that level required for zero growth, if you think of it in long run. So in a population that has very low mortality. So if you think of it roughly 2 births per woman, that's zero growth rate. One replaces you, one replaces your other parent. So this combination of various factors, two of which we just discussed very quickly here, are among some of the factors that have really affected our change in our population and the expected projections. So given that today's population, we just hit 8 billion, and it was only 12 years ago that we were at 7 billion. So this is something that some people are concerned about and what it means in long term for our planet. So really, in order to understand what the future holds, you must have an understanding of an area of study called population dynamics. So in this unit today, which will start today, we will learn about the characteristics of populations and the ways in which populations interact with one another. And we will also learn ways to estimate populations and calculate population growth. We will examine factors affecting human population growth and looking closely to the impact of exponential human growth on both the environment and also how it contributes to our overall ecological footprint. So overall, you are expected to be able to analyze the relationships between population growths, between personal consumption, technological development, and also our ecological footprint, and then assess the effectiveness of some Canadian innovations that are intended to assist in the expanding populations. You might also have to investigate the characteristics of population growth and use models to calculate the growth of population within an ecosystem. And finally, you need to demonstrate an understanding of the concepts related to population growth and be able to explain the factors that affect growth of various population of species. So these are some of the things that we will be looking at in our unit. But beginning with our first lesson, we are going to look closely at community interactions. And ecology is the study of that relationship between organisms and their environment. And it involves the interaction between both the living and the non-living components within the environment. And by living, we call those biotic. Those biotic components of the environment involve all those living things and how they interact with the population. And then the non-living components, the abiotic components, those are the ones that can include things such as light and water and soil. These are abiotic. These are the non-living components. And so in this lesson, we'll look at factors that cause changes in the population, taking a detailed look at that density dependent and also density independent factors. We'll discuss what these two mean, density dependent and density independent factors. And we'll take a look at, we'll learn how to explain how a change in one population, whether it be aquatic and water or terrestrial, land-based, on these two types of ecosystems, how a change in one population can affect that entire hierarchy of living things in a system, and to be able to explain the concepts of interaction, for example, terms such as competition, predation, defense mechanism, symbiotic relationship, parasitic relationship. We're going to discuss all of these terms and how these concepts of interaction between these different species affect one another, and also explain those factors such as carrying capacity, fecundity, density, and predation, and how these lead to fluctuations, to changes in population, and then to look at those fluctuations in a population of a species, whether it be a plant or wild animal or even a microorganism. And overall, to be able to describe the factors that affect population change. So first, we're going to look at interactions within communities. So organisms usually stay together in groups of members of the same species. And this is called a population. When you have groups of members of the same species that stay together, this is called a population. And generally, it becomes restricted to a specific area. And these populations will interact with population of different species within what we call a community. So let's look at, there's actually this hierarchy here, this diagram with levels of organization. So right, we have at the very top, we have the biosphere, which is that part of Earth that contains all the ecosystems. So really our Earth is our biosphere. Then the next level of hierarchy are the ecosystems, and these are communities and all of its living and non-living surroundings and components. So for example, here we have an ecosystem, and as a part of this ecosystem are the hawks, the snakes, the bison, the prairie dogs, the grass that's growing on the land, the stream that's feeding into this system, the rocks, the air, that is all that ecosystem. The next level of hierarchy down from that then is the community. And that's that population that live together in that defined area. And they're generally members of the same species. So you have a community of bison, bison, hawk, prairie dogs, and the grass. This is all the community of the population. And then next level down is the actual population. And this is the organism of one type that live together in the same area. For example, this herd of bison would be one of the populations living within this community. For example, the group of prairie dogs that also populate this grassland would also be another population. So altogether, these different populations exist within a community, and all the members of the community, plus all the abiotic factors, the air, the water, the rocks, the stream, those all influence these communities, and together they make up this ecosystem level. And of course, further down from the population, you have the individual living members of the population. So in the bison herd population, the individual living thing, the single organism would be, for example, the one bison that you might be of particular looking at. And then certainly if we take it many levels down, you can certainly imagine that within the bison, then there's groups of cells, tissues, organs, organ systems. You can have nervous tissues, which make up the brain and the nervous system all together. And then even further within that nervous tissue is the individual cells, the smallest functional unit. For example, in the nervous tissue, it would be a single nerve cell or the neuron. And if you take it further down, of course, there's finally, at the lowest level of this hierarchical organization, is the groups of atoms that make up the molecules, which are really the unit of most chemical compounds. Molecules such as DNA or protein or lipids or water. So altogether, we have these various components that come together to form this level of organization, all the way up from molecules. But mostly we're going to be taking our focus from the level of organism, population, community, and ecosystem, and finally up to the biosphere. There are also several niches which we have to discuss. There's the ecological niches, there's fundamental niches, there's realized niche, and we can talk about the analogy. So in the ecological niches are where you have animals that either adapt themselves constantly to changes in their community, or they survive by occupying an ecological niche. An ecological niche is the place or the function of a given organism within its ecosystem. And it really includes that set of biological characteristics that includes the use and interaction with abiotic and biotic resources. So for example, if we think of the habitat being similar to an address, then the ecological niche is the actual occupation that is happening within that habitat, within that address. There's fundamental niche. The fundamental niche is the biological characteristic of that organism and the resources in that environment that a population can theoretically use under ideal conditions. Ideal conditions, we mean when there's no competition and there's abundant resources. There's no pressure being placed on any of the resources. There's no competition, and there's as much as you can have access to in terms of resources. Then there is the term realized niche. This is that biological characteristic of the organism and the resources in the environment that the population actually does use because of competition, because of the existence of competition. For example, if we want to look at some of these examples and use an analogy, let's say, let's say you are capable, you have the capacity of becoming the next Canadian Idol winner, and that would be your fundamental niche. But because there's so much competition from others, that may mean that you may only become the runner-up, and that would be the realized niche. So as we mentioned, there's lots of factors that can affect population changes. And in nature, there are limiting factors that act on population to prevent populations from achieving and arriving at their biotic potential or their carrying capacity. And carrying capacity is the maximum number. This is a term that we can define here. Carrying capacity means the maximum number of the organisms that can be sustained by those resources that are available over a specified time period. So if a population is small and the resources are plentiful, then a population may grow quickly. But then over time, because of limiting factors, that population growth tends to slow down and then stop. That's when the population has reached the carrying capacity of that ecosystem. And we also need to define the term limiting factor. Limiting factor means any one of those essential resources that happens to be in short supply or becomes unavailable. And this may be either abiotic or biotic. For example, there might be shortage of light, or there might be food, prey, predators shortage, or there might be a shortage of space or shelter, or there might be a shortage of breeding sites, a shortage of water, nutrients, and many more things that you may think of. And those can all limit the growth of a certain population. And often the population is affected by several limiting factors that really act together to affect that population's change. And these limiting factors fall under two broad categories, and those are the density independent and the density dependent factors. So the density independent factors, as you may guess, are not dependent on population density. So these influence population regardless of the population density, or whether or not the population is large or small, whether it's growing or shrinking. It's density independent. For example, population growth is limited by human interventions through things such as the use of insecticides, and extreme weather changes in the environmental conditions can limit some organisms that are unable to breed in extreme temperatures. Or there might be a wildfire that sweeps through a forest and can have a very big impact on every population in that community, regardless of the density of any one particular population. So a wildfire would be an example of an abiotic or a non-living factor, and most density independent limiting factors fall typically into this category of abiotic or non-living factors. And there's other density independent factors, such as hurricanes or pollutants or seasonal climate extremes. These are all density independent limiting factors, and typically they are abiotic or non of density of limiting factors are the density dependent limiting factors. And these generally tend to be biotic, having to do with living organisms, and they have a greater impact as population density increases or decreases. And here are some of the examples of density dependent factors. For example, there is excuse me. There is intraspecific competition, where you have individuals from the same species or population competing for resources in their habitat. As an example, you may have stronger animals that will survive where weaker ones will die, because the stronger ones will generally have a better chance of competing for those resources. And this is intraspecific, meaning it's within the same population. A second example of that would be, a second example of density dependent limiting factors would be predation, where you have consumption of animals or prey by predators, or for example, carnivores. This would be an example of predation, where you have usually a member of another species being predated upon by another species, and typically they would be the carnivores. A third example would be disease, where you have dense or overcrowded populations. Pathogens get passed from host to host with much greater ease, obviously, because there are more hosts available in close proximity to one another. If you can think of the example of if you step into a very, very tightly packed, crowded bus or crowded room for a long time, and you have a more chance of contracting a pathogen or a virus in that sort of a situation, because there's just more people around and in much closer proximity. So there's just a lot more chance of you catching a bug or a disease. And number four, the fourth example, is called the alley effect. And in small populations, it's oftentimes very difficult for an individual to find mates. So this is an example of what happened with the passenger pigeon, where the population was so small that there just wasn't enough opportunities to find mates. So this led to a decline in that population. And then finally, when there is a small population, this results in inbreeding within that population. And this inbreeding leads to the loss of genetic variation, because if you only have a small sample of genes, you have a very limited gene pool. And so this leads to a loss of genetic variation. And so the smallest number of individuals that ensures that the population can persist for a determined interval of time, this number is referred to as the minimum viable population size. So that's the smallest number of individuals to make sure that the population can live on within a given number of within a given time interval. And this minimum viable population size varies from species to species, and it's very useful to help to estimate populations that are at risk. So how do different species interact within any given community? You can classify these interactions between two species in these major categories of interaction. There is competition, there is predation, and there is symbiosis. And they're summarized here in this table. And the effect on the population is listed too. But we're going to go through them in detail. And let's start with the first one, competition. So interspecific competition, and if you remember, we talked about intraspecific competition, which was between individuals of the same species competing for resources. This is interspecific competition, and this happens between individuals of different species competing for an essential or common resource that is limited in supply. And this can limit population growth in two ways, through interference and through exploitive competition. Through interference means that there's actual fighting over the resources. For example, you might have bird species that are tree swallows and bluebirds, and they will be competing over who gets to live and take over the shelter of a birdhouse, for example. And there is exploitative competition. For example, the consumption or the use of a shared resource. For example, in Arctic foxes and snowy owls, those are two different species, but they both prey on the Arctic hare. So there's competition for the same resource or food. And in both of these cases, the strongest competition occurs between populations of species that experience a niche overlap. So if there is an overlap in the type of niche, that competition tends to become strongest as a result of that. And the results of these interspecific competitions between two species is that the population size of the weaker competitor, as you may guess, will be the one to decrease. And another result would be that between the two species, one of the species will have to change its behavior and in order to survive and learn to rely and use different resources, or one population could migrate to somewhere else where there is more resources available. And all of these would ultimately reduce the competition, whether the population size of one of them decreases, whether one of them changes their behavior to use different resources, or whether one of them just migrates to somewhere else. Ultimately, the end result of all of these is to reduce competition. Sometimes species that occupy the same niche will avoid or reduce competition for similar resources through a process called resource partitioning. And this means that each organism then uses a different part of that habitat. And here are some examples where you have some animals that can share common food needs, which may then avoid competition by occupying different sections of their habitat. For example, some might live on the leaf litter floor, while others will live higher up on the shady branches, and thereby they will avoid competition over food. So in this way, they have partitioned their resources. In plants, for example, some plants will have roots that go to different levels within the soil, thereby capturing nutrients from different regions and then reducing competition amongst nearby plants. So that is resource partitioning, where each organism that is competing for the same resource will use a different part of that habitat in order to access that same resource. And this interspecific competition that we've just discussed forces populations to evolve adaptations that enable them to use resources for a continued survival. If they don't, as you can imagine, what will be the end result is that they will perish. And when they perish, of course, that's another example of a population size of the weaker competitor will decrease, and ultimately there would be a reduction in competition. Now, the other type of interaction between two species takes place through predation. And predation is an example of interspecific interaction, again, where the population density of one species, for example, the predator, might increase, while the population density of the other species, which would typically be the prey, would decrease, will go down. And the effect on the size of the predator and prey population, there will oftentimes be a lag between the responses in these population changes. For example, if you have an increase in the prey population, this will lead to increase in food for the predators, which will lead to an increase in the predator population. If you have an increase in the predator population, this will cause decreased prey because they're eating more of the prey. And then this will cause a decrease in the predator population because they've eaten their food resource. So here in this graph shows that predator and prey cycle between, for example, a moose population and a wolf population, where the wolf population, they are the predators and the moose is the prey. So you can see how over the years, as the one population goes up, the other one goes down, and this happens in cycles. And this is again as a result of, for example, when the moose population is up, then there's lots of food to eat for the predators. So then this will shortly get followed in the next years with increases in the predator population. And then as the predator population goes up, and they eat more moose, you will notice a decline in the moose population. And as the moose population then goes down, well, then there's less food for the wolves to eat. So the wolf population will now go down. And since there's fewer wolves to hunt moose, now the moose population can come back up again. So as you can see, there's this cycle of up, down, up with the predator, with the prey, followed closely with a similar up, down, kind of a cycle with the predator population as well. And there's often, they're not perfectly synchronized. There's often a little bit of a lag between the responses because it takes time for these numbers to adjust and affect one another. All right, so that brings us to the end of our lesson here, which leaves us, I think, plenty of time to do our presentations. So yeah, next class, we'll cover lesson 18 in population ecology. And now we can turn to doing our presentations. So I see we have a couple of students absent. We only have 4 here with us today. Actually, what happened to, let me just see. Who did we lose? Oh, I think we lost Taha along the way. All right, so let's start with our with our presentations. All right, I'm turning my video on. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna just go alphabetically if that's okay. Unless somebody wants to volunteer to go first, let me know if anybody would like to go first. Would anybody like to go first? Okay, then I'm just gonna go alphabetically, and I think my first one would be Ahmed. Ahmed, are you ready to present?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. So, all right. So now you need to, I guess, share screen with us.
It says host disabled participants.
Let me see, where is that in the settings? I have done this once before, if only I could remember how I did it. Let's see.
I think it might be like the share screen button, the green one. There should be like an arrow, I think.
Okay, let me just go to that and see. Share screen, the green button. Okay, there's basic, there's advanced. Oh gosh, I apologize for not having figured this out. Okay, that's not it.
I think like
share screen options. Okay, there we go. And multiple participants. All right. Did that work? Did that do it, Ahmed?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for helping me out with that. All right. Hi, Ahmed.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So can you see the screen?
I can. Can everybody else?
Yes.
Okay, great. Patrick, Nikki, and Natalie, you guys can all see it?
Yeah.
All right. Take it away, Ahmed.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. Welcome to my presentation on radioisotopes. So I'll first begin by giving a quick introduction as to what a radioisotope is. So basically radioisotopes, which are also called radionuclides, are an unstable form of a chemical element. And because of this, they usually break down in order to become more stable. During this process, they release radiation, which has many uses, for example, in medicine, where they are used in imaging tests and treatment. There are two main types of radioisotopes in the world. There are those that are found in nature, such as uranium-238, and those who are artificially created in nuclear laboratories through the bombarding of subatomic particles. These artificial ones tend to usually have a shorter lifespan or half-life, mostly due to their unstable nature and radioactivity. So why are they unstable? Isotopes are atoms of the same element with the same number of protons, but with different numbers of neutrons. Radioisotopes are basically just unstable isotopes of an element because of either too many or too little neutrons in their nucleus, which will cause them to spontaneously rearrange themselves to reach a more stable state in a process called radioactive decay. So as mentioned before, radioisotopes are unstable because they have either too many or too little neutrons, and so they tend to want to break down through radioactive decay. And this process occurs by emitting alpha and beta particles. And this process is also what results in the emission of energy in the form of electromagnetic radiation called gamma rays, which have many uses and are essential parts in many fields, such as medicine, for example, in the treatment of cancer, where those rays are used to destroy or damage their cells. So I have a short, quick video we could watch.
And chemical properties of any atom are determined by the numbers of protons in its nucleus. As atoms get bigger and heavier, the nuclei get bigger and heavier, and the proton...
Sorry.
Chemical properties of any atom are determined by the numbers of protons in its nucleus. As atoms get bigger and heavier, the nuclei get bigger and heavier, and the protons need a sort of nuclear glue to help hold them together. Neutrons provide this glue and prevent the positive charges of protons from repelling each other, thanks to something called the strong nuclear force. Elements can exist with slightly different numbers of neutrons, and we call these isotopes of an element. It is particularly common for heavy elements where a lot of neutrons are required to hold the nucleus together, but smaller and lighter examples include the isotopes of hydrogen. Hydrogen-1, hydrogen-2, also called deuterium, and hydrogen-3, also known as tritium, are the three isotopes of hydrogen. They have 0, 1, and 2 neutrons respectively. Tritium is the heaviest isotope of hydrogen as it has a larger mass number. Note that in each of these isotopes, there is a single proton. This means that the element is unchanged, and that's the important point. It is still hydrogen and will react chemically in exactly the same way. There is often more than one stable isotope of an element. In fact, much of the world around us is made up of stable isotopes. However, sometimes there aren't enough neutrons in a nucleus, or there may be too many for it to be stable. An analogy is a person carrying boxes. If you try to carry too many boxes, you'll end up dropping some. And if you continue, you'll keep dropping boxes until you reach a manageable amount. This is your stable state. And nuclei behave in a similar way, and they will try to stabilize themselves. If there are too many protons or too many neutrons, the nucleus can spontaneously rearrange itself and throw out particles in the process. This is essentially what happens in radioactive decay. Isotopes that have unstable nuclei like this are known as radioactive isotopes or radioisotopes. In our hydrogen examples, tritium are unstable and are hence radioisotopes of hydrogen. The more unstable a nucleus, the faster it will try to rearrange itself into a more stable state. And another name for this process is radioactive decay. Radioisotopes are often used in medicine to trace aspects of body chemistry or blood flow. For example, a small amount of the radioisotope technetium-99 may be injected into the bloodstream to show up on medical imaging and X-rays, and this is known as a medical tracer. Tracers can be used by chemists to understand how a reaction works. Atoms of radioisotopes can act as markers, allowing chemists to follow how a reaction sequence occurs. And of course, radioisotopes are also used in radiotherapy to kill malignant cancer cells. So, as you can see, isotopes are important in modern science, and so we'll finish with a summary of the key.
All right, so manufacturing radioisotopes. There are a few ways that radioisotopes can be manufactured. The most common way is by neutron activation in a nuclear reactor. This involves the capture of a neutron by the nucleus of an atom, which results in an excess of neutrons and produces something called a neutron-rich radioisotope. While some other radioisotopes are manufactured in a cyclotron, in which protons are introduced to the nucleus, resulting in a deficiency of neutrons. And so this produces proton-rich radioisotopes. At present, there are more than 200 different types of radioisotopes produced from nuclear reactors and accelerators around the world. So radioisotopes have many different uses across many different fields. First, there is nuclear medicine, which is probably the most common use of radioisotopes. It is a branch of medicine that uses radiation to provide information about the functioning of a person's specific organs or to treat diseases. In most cases, this information is used by physicians to make a quick, accurate diagnosis of the patient's illness. For example, the thyroid, bone, heart, liver, and many other organs can easily be imaged, and disorders in their function can be revealed. In some cases, radiation from radioisotopes can even be used to treat diseased organs or cancerous tumors. Radioisotopes are also used in archaeology in processes such as carbon dating, which examines a radioisotope of carbon called carbon-14, which has a very long average lifespan of around 5,730 years. And so archaeologists are able to determine the age of organic fossils based on the amount of this radioisotope that is left. And lastly, radioisotopes like iridium-192 are used in industry and technology, for example, to verify that pipe welding is airtight and properly sealed, which is especially important in transport pipes for heavy crude oil and fuels. So regarding nuclear medicine, radiotherapy is one of the most popular uses of radioisotopes in that field. It is well known that rapidly dividing cells are easily damaged by radiation, and so that's why rapidly dividing cancer cells can be easily eliminated by radiation. Radioisotopes are used to either emit external radiation on a tumor, such as gamma beams from radioactive isotopes such as cobalt-60, or through internal radiotherapy by implanting a wire, which can be a gamma or beta emitter, to attack target cancer cells. And this picture here shows the different radioisotopes used for different kinds of cancers according to whether they emit more alpha or beta particles. So it says that, for example, in alpha particles, they emit a higher amount of energy, but they can only travel shorter distances, while beta particles emit lower energy, but can travel further. So they're used for different things. Radiodiagnosis is also an important branch of nuclear medicine, where radioisotope material called radioactive tracers are administered to a patient through either injection, inhalation, or orally, so that they emit gamma rays from within the body. A scanner in the form of a gamma camera is then used to detect the radiation emitted from certain radioisotopes that tend to accumulate in certain organs. And this allows it to capture images from the points where this radiation is emitted. For example, a scan of the thyroid gland detects radioactive iodine 131. As you can see in this picture, it can even differentiate between the different diseases by tracking the pattern of radioisotope uptake. Another type of radiodiagnosis are the PET scans, which stands for positron emission tomography, which can detect early cancers. The radioisotope or radiotracer of fluorine-18 is usually given by injection and accumulates in the target tissue. And this works slightly differently than the first type of radiodiagnosis I mentioned, because these sorry, I got a notification from Zoom that says people can't see the screen anymore.
No, I can see the screen. Can everybody else see the screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, okay. It's a department. Okay. All right, I'll keep So this works slightly differently than the first type of radiodiagnosis I mentioned, because these radioisotopes emit positrons, which emit a pair of gamma rays. Sorry, the voice is breaking up.
It's a little bit unstable, but I can still hear you and make out what you're saying. I'm okay. Is everybody else okay too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, carry on.
So I left. So yeah, so this is a little different than the first type of radiodiagnosis I mentioned, because these radioisotopes emit positrons, which emit a pair of gamma rays, which are traveling in opposite directions. And those rays are then detected by a scanner around the patient. And by combining those gamma ray pairs, a clear image of the body can be constructed. So production and safety concerns. In general, most prolonged exposure to any radioactive material is harmful to the body, as it can ionize chemicals within the body, which can change the way the cells can behave or even kill them. However, being exposed to small doses for short amounts of time in a medical setting is not as harmful. And this concept is what nuclear medicine is all about and can actually save a lot of people's lives. However, during the production process of creating many of these artificial radioisotopes, a lot of safety concerns arise. Firstly, the employees at these nuclear facilities face a risk of exposure to radiation, as they are present around it for long periods of time. This is why shielding equipment, periodic testing of facilities, and proper safety measures are crucial. For example, all employees and even radiology physicians are required to wear radiation dosimeters, which measure the amount of radiation an individual has been exposed to and let off a warning if the daily limit is reached. And I have a picture of it up here on the slide. And the process of artificially creating these radioisotopes also produces radioactive waste, which must be very carefully contained and disposed of as not to pose any risk to the public surrounding these factories. As for the high cost associated with these radioisotopes, it can mostly be attributed to the difficult and complicated process of artificially creating them, as most radioisotopes used, especially in medicine, which is their most popular use, are artificially created. Working with radioactive materials such as these requires special safety measures and devices such as radioactive monitoring system and multi-layered shielding, which must all be installed in factories and can drive up the cost of production. Not to mention that regular leak testing and maintenance must occur to keep the public and employees safe, which is also quite expensive. The disposal of the radioactive waste generated from the creation of these radioisotopes is complicated and expensive and requires careful planning. And lastly, although there is a lot of demand for these radioisotopes, there are not too many laboratories with cyclotrons that commercially produce them. And so this can be another factor in increasing their price, especially since it's not possible to stockpile them due to their short half-lives. For example, technetium-99m, which is widely used in medical diagnosis, regularly suffers from shortages due to being produced at aging nuclear reactors that often need to be shut down for repairs. Thank you for listening, and I'll take any questions. And
Okay.
my reference.
Thank you very much. All right, great. Anybody have any questions? Patrick, Natalie, you guys have questions?
No, miss.
No, miss.
No? Okay. All right, so yeah, so I have a question about one of the slides you showed that, for example, radioactive markers can be ingested or inhaled and actually can go into the body and show the various rates of uptake at various organs and help to show what stage of disease this might be. Wouldn't you think this would be a problem if you're ingesting or intaking radioactive material that is then dispersed throughout your body? What do you comment on that?
It's definitely a concern, but I think it could be expelled out of the system after a certain amount of time. I think actually when I was telling my mom about this project, she was saying that early when I was still a little kid, she had to take one of those tests with radio tracers, and the doctors had told her that she would have to, after she would take them, she'd have to stay away from small children for around 48 hours. And so I think there's these safety measures in place to like that eventually it's going to get expelled out of the system, but you need to wait a little bit.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Anybody have any other questions? Anything else comes to your mind? Any question at all? And nothing is, don't feel shy or silly for asking a question. Okay. In that case, let's go to the next person up, Natalie.
Hi, miss. Just one second.
Hi.
Can you see my camera?
I see you're loading your Google Doc. I don't see your face. I don't have your camera yet. So if you could turn on your camera.
How do I go back to the Zoom? Oh, okay, wait, I found it.
Great, yep, I see you now. Hi.
Hi, Miss. Okay. So today my presentation is going to be on Hodia gordonii. Hodia gordonii is a spiny, succulent plant, usually growing on dry, stony slopes or flats and under the protection of xerophytic bushes. The
So
flowers are
Natalie,
large and have a carrion-like smell.
Natalie, I'm just going to ask you to pause for a minute. I don't know how it is on everybody else's screen, but on my screen, your presentation is still loading. I don't see I briefly saw the slide come up, but now, okay, I see you now. Okay, I have
So
it.
when I share it, it doesn't show.
I see it now. Now you're sharing.
So should I keep it like this instead
I
of
think so.
slideshow?
Everybody else can see it like this?
Yes, miss.
Yeah, yeah, good. Okay, yeah, leave it like this and yeah, because otherwise it was showing loading for me. I don't know how it was showing for other people, but yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Do you want me to restart?
No, you can carry on from where you were. I think you were still on your introduction slide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So usually growing on dry, stony slopes or flats and under the protection of xerophytic bushes. The flowers are large and have a carrion-like smell. So the smells like rotten meat. It has been consumed for thousands of years by Komani Bushmen as a hunger and thirst suppressant during hunting trips. And based on anecdotal reports, Hodia gordonii has been proposed as an anorectic agent for use by those seeking to lose or maintain weight. Hodia gordonii is one of the most sought-after succulents due to its medical properties. It has been called one of the wonder plants of the 21st century. And in the early stages, only one stem is produced, but at later stages, the plant starts branching. Mature plants can have as many as 50 individual branches and weigh as much as 30 kilograms. So where is it found? Hodia gordonii, also known as Bushman's hat, is found in the Kalahari Desert in the southern part of Africa, mainly in Botswana. The spiny stem succulent grows in gravel or shale plains. It also resembles a cactus. The first Europeans to encounter Hodia gordonii were Patterson and Cole R.F. Gordon, who in December 1778 found specimens in the Uppington area. However, they are not the first to discover the Hodia gordonii plant. Okay. So how does it control weight loss or weight? Hodia gordonii's active ingredient is appetite-suppressing molecule, P57 or oxypregnane, steroidal glycoside, P57AS. African cactiform Hodia gordonii has been consumed for thousands of years by Komani Bushmen as a hunger and thirst suppressant during hunting trips. And also it treats for high blood pressure, diabetes, and a cure for abdominal cramps, hemorrhoids, tuberculosis, indigestion, and hypertension, long before it was sought after in Western world in its battles with obesity. So glycoside P57 is the main constituent from H. gordonii, which could increase ATP content in the hypothalamus, to possess anorexigenic activity. Today, extracts from Hodia gordonii are used in dietary supplements that claim to reduce appetite and boost weight loss. Okay. So potential side effects are headaches, nausea, increased heart rate, high blood pressure, sorry, I can't see my screen, impaired liver function. Hodia products have been shown to contain sibutramine. Sibutramine is a substance removed from the US market in 2010 due to its potential to increase blood pressure and heart rate. Okay, potential problems with obtaining this substance. So the possible sorry, I was reading my old screen. The potential problems with obtaining this substance. All Hodia species in Namibia are protected by nature conservation laws. So this means that the harvesting, cultivation, relocation, and plants and trade of Hoodia material is subject to permit controls. Permits are obtainable from the Ministry of Environment and Tourism. However, there are no regulated manufacturing standards in place for these compounds. Hoodia hasn't been evaluated by the FDA for safety, effectiveness, or purity. Buying it from a seller is not recommended because there's no way to identify the quality and authenticity of the substance. There have been instances where herbal/health supplements have been sold, which were contaminated with toxic metals or drugs. So studies and commercialization. In the early 2000s, Hoodia was developed and marketed as a weight loss supplement in the US due to its historical use, as well as the findings of a few animal studies that suggested it may reduce food intake. One study found that capsules containing Hoodia reduced food intake, appetite, body weight, carbohydrate cravings, and a slight energizing impact on 8 obese patients. 2 were men and 6 were women. In 2004, Phytopharm and Unilever in the Netherlands worked together to create a functional food product. However, in 2008, after reportedly investing $40 million, Unilever ended the collaboration because P57 could not live up to the company's strict safety and efficiency requirements. In 2009, 3 companies faced lawsuits for making these claims that their diet supplements contained Hoodia extract. So these are the availability and effects of Hoodia. Hoodia is available as a liquid, powder, skin cream, and patch. So the patch would go on the stomach of the person trying to use it to lose weight. It is still unknown whether or not Hoodia interacts with medicine or other supplements, except for substrates of cytochrome, P450 and 344. However, as I stated earlier, it does have side effects such as nausea, increased heart rate, and many others. Hoodia supplements are not regulated by the US FDA. Experts say there aren't enough Hoodia plants in the world for all the alleged products on the market. Some products have been found to contain little to no Hoodia, including the wrong plant parts and questionable plant sources. So those are some myths and facts about Hoodia. So some myths are saying that it will make you lose weight without any effort, and it's not true. You actually have to have a diet and continually work out. It's not just you take the pill and it'll help you, because before they used to go hunting while they would take this plant and it would help them to not starve. So what was learned about Hoodia? There has only been one study so far done on Hoodia, so there's very little information on the safety and the information such as dosage and the effects on your body. During the study, patients taking Hoodia had more side effects than those taking placebos, including nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and odd skin sensations. Of concern, Hoodia significantly affected some clinical and safety parameters, such as blood pressure and electrocardiogram. So the heart functions. Not much is known about if it's safe to use during pregnancy or while breastfeeding. That's the end of my presentation.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Ahmed or Patrick? All right. So what was your personal view of this? So when you chose this this topic on Hoodia Gordoni, were you just curious, or what did you find? And now that you've done this research and you've done this presentation on it, what do you think about Hoodia Gordoni?
I think that honestly, people that take this stuff are just lazy people, because there's so many other ways to lose weight rather than looking for something that hasn't had significant studies on it. There wasn't much information. Even if I wanted to take it for myself, I wouldn't know the side effects 100% because everyone reacts differently.
Mm-hmm.
And me personally, I react really badly to most antibiotics or any kind of medication.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it would be something smart to take. I'd rather, have like a real diet or a workout plan or something like that.
Yeah, so you sound very wise for for noticing that on Hoodia Gordonian. That is a story that is sometimes very typical of magic bullet diet pills, as oftentimes they're only backed by one or two studies that have often not even had a good enough population represented in there, and oftentimes there's many side effects and there's just not enough done on it to back the claims. And I personally, obviously everybody needs to make their own choices and make their own decisions, but I personally agree with you. There are so many better ways to pursue a healthy diet and to maintain a healthy weight without having to put yourself into this situation with this this so-called magic bullet pill with so many side effects, so many unknowns, that is not even regulated. So thank you for this presentation.
Thank you.
That was great. Now our last person tonight, Patrick, are you good to go?
I think so.
Okay, great.
Okay. File. Miss, just give me a moment. I have to put like access to my thing because it's not letting me. Hold on.
Okay, yeah, we have time. We're not running out of time.
Miss, I just have a question. Where do we submit the assignment?
Oh, you can also drop that off in the Dropbox. Let me just see. Did I put a specific link for the assignment? You know what? I'll provide you guys with a link for the assignment. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will provide you guys with a link for that.
Miss, can you guys see my screen?
I can, yes.
Yeah,
How about if I put in the slideshow? Can you see or no?
I can see your slideshow, yeah.
You can see it? Okay.
Yep.
Can you guys see me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Can you see me though or no, Miss?
Oh, I can't see you yet. No.
Okay. Hello?
Yep, there you are. Hi.
Hi class. So this is my presentation on steroids. There are four main steroids in our body. The first one is androgen. It is found in both genders, but has higher levels in men. Testosterone is the primary androgen, but there's also other androgens called androstenedione, dihydroepiandrosterone, and DH sulfate, and dihydrotestosterone. In all genders, these androgens help with bone density, muscle development, puberty, red blood cells, and productivity, sexual desire, and function. When men have, When men have normal testosterone levels, they are prone to getting a deep voice, hair growth on the face, scalp, chest, underarms, and genitals, also sperm development. And having high testosterone causes acne, hair loss, hair thinning, and increased prostate cancer. While having low testosterone causes fatigue, anxiety, depression, difficulty concentrating, poor exercise tolerance, low sex drive, and erectile dysfunction. It can also lead to breast development called gynecomastia. The second steroid in our body is called estrogen, also known as estrogen. It is found in both males and females, but females have higher levels of estrogen. For women, androgens get converted more to estrogen, and this helps regulate menstruation, aids in conception and pregnancy, minimizes bone loss, and stimulates pubic and underarm hair growth. Having high levels can cause polycystic ovary syndrome, also known as PCOS. This can also cause acne and facial hair. Low levels of androgen can cause bone fractures and aspirosis, fatigue, and low sex drive for females. The third steroid in our body is progesterone, which is a female sex hormone. It is produced mainly in the ovaries following ovulation each month. It helps to regulate your cell cycle, but its main job is to get your uterus ready for pregnancy. After you ovulate each month, progesterone helps thicken the lining of the uterus to prepare for a fertilized egg. It's there for, sorry, if there is no fertilized egg, progesterone's level drop and menstruation begins. Symptoms of low progesterone in women who aren't pregnant include headaches or migraines, mood changes, including anxiety or depression, irregularly in the menstrual cycles. Glucocorticoids are cholesterol-driven steroid hormones synthesized and secreted by adrenal gland. They are an anti-inflammatory in all tissues, and they control metabolism in the muscle, fat, and liver and bone. Glucocorticoids also affect vascular tone and in the brain influence mood, behavior, and sleep wakefulness cycles. The pros are that inflammation is your immune system's response to an injury or infection. It makes your body more white blood cells and chemicals to help you heal. Glucocorticoids keep your body from pumping out many of the chemicals involved in inflammation. They also dial back your immune system response by changing the way white blood cells work. The cons to having a lot of glucocorticoids is immune suppression, muscle atrophy, central adiposity, and insulin resistance, and depression and insomnia. A performance-enhancing drug is any substance taken by athlete to improve performance, develop muscle and strength. The anabolic steroid use in sports by professional and athletes. 3-time and running classic Mr. Olympia, Chris Bumstead, is a professional bodybuilder and has been competing at bodybuilder shows and using PEDs since he was 19. Chris uses PEDs to grow and put on mass and muscle on his frame while getting lean. Chris competes in the biggest and well-known competition, and if he wants to keep on winning each meet, he has to abuse steroids to keep his title. As you can see in this graph, bodybuilders take injectables and oral steroids. So there is Masteron, Primobolan, Anavar, Anadrol, Winstrol, Proviron, Superdrol, and DHB, which are all oral steroids. Then the injectables are Equipoise, Dianabol, Halotestin, Trenbolone, and Transtosterone. In addition, effects of anabolic steroids in men can include reduced sperm count, infantility, shrunken testicles, hair loss, breast development, increased risk of prostate cancer, severe acne, and stomach pain. In women, anabolic steroids can cause facial hair growth in the body, loss of breasts, swelling of clitoris, a deepened voice, an increased sex drive, problems with periods, hair loss, and severe acne. In addition, both men and women who take anabolic steroids can develop any of the following medical condition: heart attack or stroke, liver or kidney problems or failure, high blood pressure, blood clots, fluid retention, high cholesterol, and physiological effects. Many anabolic steroids can also cause the following physiological and emotional effects: aggression behavior, mood swings, paranoia, manic behavior, and finally hallucination. That's my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ahmed and Natalie, do you guys have any questions for Patrick?
No, miss.
Okay.
No.
All right. Okay, so Patrick, you've done quite a bit of research and you've done this presentation on anabolic steroids.
Mhm.
So what do you think? Do you think there is a place for steroids, or do you think steroids are just bad and we should avoid them?
Well, like to me, I'm in I like this topic a lot. I don't like I watch like the bodybuilder shows and everything, so I am like intrigued by it. So you're
Mhm.
kind of asking the wrong guy, in my opinion.
No. I'm asking for just your personal take on this, because I'm guessing, I'm hoping everybody chose topics that at some level appeal to them, and they were curious about or interested in. So yeah, no, go ahead. Speak
Yeah.
freely.
Yeah, so for me, I believe, let's say if you want to compete like in the actual shows, you should take steroids just to like furthermore advanced. If that's your career, then you
Mhm.
should take it.
Mhm.
Now there are some people that just go and take steroids at a young age, like 15, 14, 13, whatever, and it just messes up their whole body, which I don't believe you should do that at that young age. It can mess you up physiologically and ruin like everything in your body. So I'm against that. But later in life, like let's just say for me, I wouldn't mind taking these compounds at like a further date in my life. And after I like train and eat properly for like I would say 5 to 10 years. After that, you lose testosterone, and as you're getting older, you get smaller and your muscles like you can't hold them anymore. So I think they are necessary, but some people just blast them, use them wrong. But yeah, that's my opinion on them.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank
All
you.
right, great. Yeah, we are done with our presentations. We will catch the rest of the presentations, I guess, next class. Thank you, all three of you for being prepared and for having your presentations ready. I'll have some comments and I'll mark your presentations, and once I've had a chance to look at some of the other presentations as well. Excuse me. So yeah, if we're okay, I'm okay to stop things right now, and I'll see you guys all next class. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, miss. Have a good night.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Take care. Bye-bye.